I can stop the breach, sir.
You?
Grant Whitmore turned from the war room screens, red alerts flashing, 72 hours before 12 million records hit the dark web.
Stop being so delusional!
I've seen the encryption pattern.
Who the hell are you to argue with me?
He stepped closer.
Do you want me to kick you back to your filthy garbage dump?
Camille Archer didn't flinch.
Let me try.
Whitmore looked at his executives and laughed.
My assistant wants to hack my system. Crack it and I'll hand you $1 million myself.
He sneered.
You filthy idiots are dumb as hell! You can't crack it!
Camille memorized every line of code scrolling behind him. Then she walked out. 3 minutes later, with just a library computer, the black assistant turned his entire empire upside down. 6 months earlier, Camille Archer had walked into Dominion Shield's lobby wearing a pressed blouse she'd ironed 3 times that morning. She carried a folder with her resume, MIT, summa cum laude, computer science, with a thesis on asymmetric encryption that her professor had called once in a decade. None of it mattered. She'd applied to 47 cybersecurity firms, 47 rejection letters. No internship pedigree, no family connections, no one to vouch for a black girl who'd aged out of foster care at 18 with nothing but a library card and a brain that could disassemble code the way a mechanic disassembles an engine. The only callback she got was for an administrative assistant position at Dominion Shield. Salary, $31,000 a year. Job description, manage schedules, order supplies, refill the coffee machine on the 43rd floor. She took it, because $31,000 was the difference between a studio apartment and a shelter. Her desk sat in a corridor between the server room and the break room. Not in a cubicle, not near a window. A folding table with a laptop so old the spacebar stuck every third keystroke. The engineers walked past her every morning like she was furniture. Most never learned her name. Derek Salton did, but only because he needed someone to blame. Derek was the senior security architect. Tall, polished, the kind of man who wore his Stanford ring to every meeting and mentioned it twice before lunch. He'd been with Dominion for 11 years and considered the 43rd floor his personal kingdom. Archer, I need 20 copies of the Q3 vulnerability assessment, collated, stapled, on my desk in 10 minutes. Yes, sir. And get the espresso machine fixed. It's pulling bitter again. Yes, sir. She never argued. She never complained. She photocopied his reports and read every single page. That was how she found the first vulnerability. Page 41 of the Q3 assessment contained a firewall configuration diagram. Camille spotted an open port that the diagram listed as closed. Port 8443, running an unpatched Apache Tomcat instance. She knew because she'd memorized the CVE database the way other people memorized song lyrics. CVE-2024-21733. Remote code execution. Severity, critical. She couldn't report it under her own name. An admin assistant flagging a security flaw would get laughed out of the building, or worse, investigated for unauthorized access. So she created an anonymous email account from the Westbrook Public Library and sent a detailed report to Dominion's IT security inbox. Subject line, critical vulnerability, port 8443. Immediate action required. 2 days later, the port was patched. No acknowledgement, no investigation into who sent it. The fix simply appeared in the next update log, credited to routine internal audit. Camille smiled at her folding table and kept photocopying. Over the next 5 months, she sent 11 anonymous reports. 11 vulnerabilities. A misconfigured SSL certificate that could have exposed client banking data, ASQL injection vector in the customer portal that a teenager could have exploited, a hard-coded API key buried in a legacy module that hadn't been updated since 2019. Every single one was patched quietly. Every single one was credited to Derek Salton's team. She kept a log in a small leather notebook, dates, vulnerability descriptions, timestamps of her anonymous emails, and the corresponding patch dates from Dominion's public changelog. She didn't know why she kept it. Maybe habit, maybe proof, maybe the same instinct that made her save the first program she ever wrote on a USB drive she still wore around her neck like a pendant. That USB held a chatbot. She'd coded it at 11 years old, sitting in the Westbrook Public Library on a Tuesday afternoon while her foster siblings watched cartoons at home. The chatbot was simple. It asked you how your day was, remembered your answer, and said something kind. She'd named it Friend, because at 11, in her fourth foster home, that was the thing she needed most. Edna Holloway, the librarian, had watched her build it. Edna was 63 then, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a habit of leaving chocolate bars on the keyboards of kids who stayed past closing time. She didn't understand code, but she understood the look on a child's face when something they built actually worked. "You made that yourself?" Edna had asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Does it work? Ask it something." Edna had typed, "How are you today?" The chatbot replied, "I'm here, and I'm glad you are too." Edna had looked at Camille over her glasses and said, "Don't you ever let anyone tell you what you can't do." Camille saved the program to the USB drive. She'd carried it every day since. 15 years, 4 foster homes, 1 degree no one respected, 1 talent no one saw. Now she stood in the hallway outside Dominion Shield's war room, the emergency lights painting her face red, Whitmore's laughter still ringing behind the closed glass doors. Her hand went to the USB at her collarbone. Nina Graves found her there. Nina was the only person at Dominion who'd ever asked Camille where she went to school. When Camille had said MIT, Nina's eyebrows had risen, then fallen into something sad. "And they have you making copies?" "It's a paycheck," Camille had said. That was 4 months ago. Now Nina touched her arm. "I heard what he said to you. That was disgusting." "It doesn't matter." "It matters. Camille, what are you going to do?" Camille looked down the corridor toward the elevator, past the break room, past her folding table, past 5 months of invisible work that kept this company breathing, and no one knew. She pulled her jacket tighter. "I'm going to the library." Nina frowned. "The library? Now? It's almost midnight." Camille was already walking. "Edna leaves the back door open for me." She didn't need Dominion servers. She didn't need their permission. She just needed 3 minutes and a machine that could barely run a spreadsheet. And the encryption pattern she'd memorized from the war room screen was already unraveling inside her head. The Westbrook Public Library sat on the corner of Maple and 9th, wedged between a laundromat and a bodega that sold coffee for $1.25. The building was 60 years old. The paint was peeling. Half the fluorescent lights in the ceiling had burned out and never been replaced. But the computers still worked. Barely. And the Wi-Fi password hadn't changed in 4 years. Camille knocked on the back door at 12:15 in the morning. Edna Holloway opened it in her bathrobe, reading glasses perched on her forehead, a paperback folded open in one hand. She looked at Camille's face and didn't ask a single question. She just stepped aside. "Computer 3, Edna said. "I replaced the keyboard last week. The old one was missing the F7 key." "Thank you, Edna." "I'll make cocoa." Camille sat down at the machine. It was a Dell from 2014. The monitor had a dead pixel cluster in the upper left corner. The fan hummed like a dying wasp. She cracked her knuckles, opened the terminal, and began typing. The ransomware that had locked Dominion Shield's entire infrastructure was a variant of Lockbit 3.0, modified, layered, and wrapped in a custom obfuscation shell designed to defeat automated decryption tools. The encryption key rotated every 90 seconds, which meant brute force was useless. Dominion's engineers had been chasing the rotation pattern for 9 hours. They hadn't found it because they were looking in the wrong place. Camille wasn't looking at the rotation. She was looking at the handshake. Every encryption protocol begins with a handshake, a brief, automated change between the ransomware and its command server that establishes the session key. Most analysts ignored the handshake because it happened in milliseconds and left almost no trace. But Camille had memorized the packet structure from the war room screen. 4 hexadecimal strings, a timestamp offset, and a signature hash that used a deprecated algorithm, SHA-1, which meant the session key could be reverse-engineered from the handshake alone. She wrote the decryption script in 112 seconds. She ran it in 48. The screen filled with green text, file after file unlocking, decrypting, restoring. Total elapsed time, 3 minutes and 7 seconds. She screen recorded the entire process. She saved the decryption key, the script, and the session logs to a folder. Then she opened her personal email and sent everything to Dominion Shield's IT security inbox, the same inbox she'd used for 11 anonymous vulnerability reports. She CC'd herself. Timestamp, 12:21 a.m. Edna set the cocoa on the desk. She looked at the screen full of green text. "Did you fix it?" "I fixed it." "Good." Edna squeezed her shoulder. "Now drink your cocoa before it gets cold." Camille wrapped her hands around the mug and let herself breathe. For 3 minutes, she had been the most important person in a $200 million company's survival. And not a single soul in that building knew it. By 6 a.m., Dominion Shield systems were fully restored. The countdown clock stopped. 12 million client records, safe. The engineering team stumbled out of the war room with bloodshot eyes and cold coffee, shaking hands and clapping backs. Derek Salton stood at the front of the morning all-hands meeting, sleeves rolled up, stubble on his jaw, looking like a man who'd been to war. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "after 14 hours of continuous work, my team has successfully neutralized the ransomware threat. Every record is intact. Every system is operational." Applause. Standing ovation. Whitmore shook Derek's hand on camera. The company's PR team drafted a press release. Dominion Shield's elite engineering team defeats sophisticated cyber attack. Camille read the press release from her folding table. She didn't react. She picked up her leather notebook, wrote the date, and drew a line under it. Then she walked to Grant Whitmore's corner office. His assistant tried to stop her. "He's in a meeting. He'll want to see this." She pushed through the glass door. Whitmore was at his desk, on the phone, grinning. Derek sat across from him, legs crossed, Stanford ring catching the light. "Mr. Whitmore." Camille placed her phone on the desk, screen up. The screen recording played, her typing the decryption script, running it, the green cascade of unlocked files. The email timestamp glowed at the bottom, 12:21 a.m. "I sent the decryption key 9 hours before your team claimed credit. Check your IT inbox." Whitmore's grin dissolved. Derek uncrossed his legs. "I have the full screen recording with metadata verification," Camille continued. "I have the email with headers intact. I have the script I wrote. And I have 11 previous vulnerability reports sent from the same email address over the past 5 months. Every one of which your team patched and took credit for." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Whitmore looked at Derek. Derek looked at the floor. Then Whitmore picked up his desk phone. "Security? I need 2 officers on 43. Now!" Camille's stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" "You accessed proprietary systems without authorization. That's a federal offense." His voice had changed, no longer mocking, but cold, calculated. "You planted the ransomware yourself so you could play hero. I see exactly what this is." "That's a lie, and you know it." "Do I?" He leaned forward. "A coffee girl with no clearance somehow cracks military-grade encryption in 3 minutes from a public library? Either you're a criminal or you're lying. Either way, you're done." 2 security guards appeared at the door. "Escort Miss Archer out of the building, confiscate her badge, disable her accounts, and call legal. I want a criminal referral to the FBI by end of business. Mr. Whitmore, I saved your company. You broke into my company. He turned his back to her. Get her out. They took her badge at the elevator. They walked her through the lobby in front of the morning shift. 200 employees watching the coffee girl get marched out like a criminal. Someone whispered. Someone laughed. Someone held up a phone. Camille walked with her back straight and her chin level. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She carried nothing but her jacket and the USB drive around her neck. The glass doors closed behind her. The morning sun hit her face. $31,000 a year, gone. Her only income, gone. Her reputation, the one she'd never even been given a chance to build, now tagged with the word criminal. She stood on the sidewalk and pressed her palm against the USB drive until the edges bit into her skin. Inside that building, they were already rewriting the story. Outside, standing alone in the sun, Camille Archer was the only person who knew the truth, and she had every bite of proof to burn it all down. Camille's studio apartment was 400 square feet on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Westbrook. No elevator, no dishwasher, a window that faced a brick wall. Rent was $890 a month, which had been manageable on $31,000 a year. Now it was a countdown. She sat on the edge of her bed that evening and did the math. Savings, $2,116, enough for 2 months of rent, food, and the prepaid phone she used because she couldn't afford a contract. After that, nothing. No severance, no unemployment because Whitmore had termed her for cause, no references because her only employer had just accused her of a federal crime. She opened the leather notebook. 11 vulnerability reports, 11 timestamps, 1 screen recording of a 3-minute decryption that saved a $200 million company. She had the evidence. What she didn't have was a voice. The USB drive rested against her collarbone. She unclipped it, plugged it into her laptop, and opened the chatbot she'd built at 11 years old. The interface was crude, green text on black background, a blinking cursor. She typed, "Are you there?" The bot replied, "I'm here, and I'm glad you are too." Camille closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since her 3rd foster home, when she learned that crying didn't change anything and silence kept you safer. The next morning, the internet changed everything. An anonymous Dominion Shield employee, Camille would later learn it was a junior analyst named Troy Beckett who'd been in the war room that night, had recorded the moment security escorted her out of the building. 38 seconds of footage. Camille walking through the lobby, badge gone, chin up, 2 guards flanking her like she was dangerous. The video's caption? She solved the ransomware. They fired her anyway. TikTok, 5 million views in 14 hours. Twitter, 800,000 reposts. Reddit's cybersecurity forum pinned it to the top. The hashtag wrote itself. Hashtag justice for Camille. The comments were a wildfire. She saved 12 million people's data and they walked her out like a thief. Let me get this straight. A black woman cracks what 6 engineers couldn't, and the CEO calls the FBI on her? Dominion Shield stock about to learn what accountability looks like. News outlets picked it up. CNN ran a banner. Fired for saving the company? MSNBC booked a cybersecurity analyst who called it the most blatant retaliation case I've seen in 20 years. Fox Business ran the stock ticker. Dominion down 11% by noon, 14% by evening. Whitmore's PR team issued a statement. We are conducting an internal review and take all allegations of misconduct seriously. The statement mentioned no names. It answered no questions. It convinced no one. Nina Graves called Camille that night. Have you seen it? You're everywhere. I've seen it. Camille, you need a lawyer, a real one. Whitmore is going to bury this if you don't move first. I can't afford a lawyer, Nina. I can barely afford groceries. Check your email. Camille opened her inbox. Between the spam and the notifications, one message stood out. Subject line: Pro bono representation. Vivian Cross, attorney at law. Vivian Cross was 51, a former federal prosecutor who'd spent 15 years putting corporate executives in prison before leaving the DOJ to start her own civil rights practice. She wore her hair in short silver locks and spoke in the kind of measured, precise sentences that made courtrooms go quiet. She'd seen the TikTok video. She'd read the Reddit thread. And she'd already pulled Dominion Shield's public filings. They met the next morning at a diner 2 blocks from the library. Vivian ordered black coffee. Camille ordered water. Not because she wasn't thirsty, but because water was free. "Show me everything," Vivian said. Camille opened her laptop, the screen recording, the email timestamps, the 11 anonymous vulnerability reports with matching IP logs from the Westbrook Public Library, the leather notebook with handwritten dates and descriptions. Vivian watched the 3-minute screen recording twice without speaking. Then she closed the laptop gently, the way you close something sacred. "Miss Archer, let me tell you what I see. I see wrongful termination. I see defamation. I see racial discrimination in a pattern of denied transfers. I see breach of a verbal contract. A $1 million bounty offered on camera. And I see a woman who has been protecting a company that doesn't deserve her. I just want the truth on the record." "We'll get more than that. But first, the transfers. You said you applied to move to the engineering team?" 3 times. Denied every time. "On what grounds?" "Different reasons each time. First, insufficient internal experience. Second, no available headcount. Third time, they didn't even give a reason, just a form email." "But they hired 2 external engineers during that same period?" "Both white, both with less experience than me. One didn't even have a degree." Vivian wrote something in her legal pad and underlined it twice. "We're filing 3 claims: wrongful termination, defamation, and racial discrimination, plus breach of contract for the $1 million bounty. I'm doing this pro bono. My fee comes from the settlement. And if we lose, we won't lose. The evidence is airtight. The question isn't whether you win. The question is how loudly." That evening, the Hacker Collective weighed in. An anonymous account known only as Ghostline, respected in the cybersecurity underground, never identified, never caught, published a technical analysis on a blog that every security professional in the country read. The post was titled, "The Dominion Decryption, a Masterclass in Reverse-Engineered Cryptanalysis." Ghostline broke down Camille's method step by step. The SHA-1 handshake exploitation, the session key reconstruction, the custom decryption script written in under 2 minutes. The conclusion was devastating. This method is original. It cannot be derived from Dominion's source code. It requires no insider access. It requires only brilliance. Whoever wrote this script is operating at a level that most senior cryptographers will never reach. The post ended with one line. "I've seen her anonymous patches. She's been protecting Dominion for months. They don't deserve her." Hashtag Hack the System joined hashtag Justice for Camille in the trending list. Dominion's stock dropped another 6% overnight. Board members started making quiet phone calls. Camille read the Ghostline post in the library, sitting at computer 3, Edna beside her with a cup of cocoa that had gone cold. "Is that about you?" Edna asked. "Yes." "Is it true?" "Yes." Edna took off her glasses and cleaned them on her cardigan, the way she always did when she was trying not to show emotion. "I always knew you were special, Camille. From the first day you sat at that computer. You were 8 years old, and you asked me what the internet was made of. You said magic and wires. I wasn't entirely wrong." Edna put her glasses back on. "What happens now?" Camille looked at the chatbot still open on the screen. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting for input. "Now," Camille said, "they find out what I'm made of." Outside the library, the world was watching. Inside, a woman who had spent her whole life being invisible was about to become the most dangerous person in the room. And Dominion Shield had no idea what was coming. Grant Whitmore did not become a CEO by losing. 3 days after the TikTok video went viral, he hired Kellerman and Associates, the most expensive crisis management firm in Washington. Their first move was a coordinated media blitz, 5 press appearances in 48 hours. The message was simple, consistent, and devastating. Camille Archer was a disgruntled employee with unauthorized access to sensitive systems. We have reason to believe she was involved in the ransomware attack itself. Dominion Shield is cooperating fully with the FBI. The word involved did the work. Not responsible, not guilty, just involved. Vague enough to avoid a libel suit, precise enough to destroy a reputation. Kellerman planted background quotes in 3 major outlets suggesting Camille had a troubled history and possible connections to known threat actors. None of it was sourced. All of it was read. It worked. The narrative split. Half the internet still rallied behind #Justice for Camille. The other half turned suspicious. Comment sections filled with a new kind of poison. How does a coffee girl crack military-grade encryption unless she already knew the code? Convenient that she just happened to have a screen recording ready. Inside job, classic social engineering. She planted it, solved it, played victim. Camille watched the comments from her studio apartment. Each one landed like a stone in her chest. She'd spent her whole life proving she belonged. Now millions of strangers were debating whether she was a genius or a criminal. And she couldn't say a word because Vivian had told her, "Do not engage. Not one tweet, not one comment, not one interview. Everything you say is evidence now." So she said nothing, and the silence ate her alive. The FBI interview came on a Tuesday. 2 agents in a gray room at the Federal Building downtown. Vivian sat beside her. Camille answered every question with the calm precision of someone who had memorized the truth because it was the only thing she had. "Walk us through the decryption process." She did, step by step. The handshake protocol, the SHA-1 vulnerability, the session key reconstruction. She drew diagrams on a legal pad. One agent, the younger one, stopped writing and just listened, his mouth slightly open. "And you did this on a public library computer?" "Dell Optiplex 3020, 12 gigabytes of RAM, Intel i5 4th generation, running Ubuntu 18.04 because Windows was too slow for the terminal work I needed." In 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 7 seconds. The screen recording has the timestamp. The agents looked at each other. The older one closed his notebook. "Miss Archer, we'll be in touch." Vivian squeezed Camille's arm in the elevator. "You were perfect. They know you didn't do it. The question is whether the Bureau has the spine to say so publicly before the hearing." The hearing. Federal District Court. Judge Annette Faulkner presiding. Vivian had filed an emergency motion to consolidate all claims: wrongful termination, defamation, racial discrimination, and breach of the $1 million verbal contract into a single proceeding. The judge granted it. Date set, 3 weeks out. Whitmore's legal team fought to delay. They filed motions to dismiss on jurisdictional grounds, argued that the verbal bounty wasn't a binding contract, claimed that Camille had signed an NDA that precluded her from discussing internal systems. Each motion was denied. Judge Faulkner was not impressed. Discovery was where the walls started cracking. Vivian subpoenaed Dominion Shield's internal communications. What came back was a graveyard of arrogance. Email from Derek Salton to Whitmore, time-stamped 6:14 a.m. on the morning of the recovery. The decryption key came from an external email. Same anonymous address that's been sending vulnerability reports. It wasn't us. Someone outside solved it. Whitmore's reply, 6:22 a.m. Delete this thread. Derek's team gets the credit. End of discussion. Another email from HR Director Pamela Yates to Whitmore 3 months earlier. Camille Archer has submitted a third transfer request to engineering. Her qualifications exceed the posted requirements. Recommend approval. Whitmore's reply. Deny it. She's more useful where she is. I don't need another diversity hire making headlines. Vivian read that email out loud in her office. Camille sat across from her, perfectly still. Diversity hire, Camille repeated. His words, in writing, to his HR director. I graduated summa cum laude from MIT. I know. My thesis was cited in 14 peer-reviewed journals. I know that too. Vivian leaned forward. Camille, this email alone is worth the entire case, but there's more. There was more. Internal logs showed that Camille's badge access had been restricted 6 weeks into her employment. She could enter the building and her floor, nothing else. No server room, no engineering wing, no lab access. The restriction was ordered by Derek Salton, approved by Whitmore, and never communicated to Camille. She'd been physically locked out of the infrastructure she was supposedly accused of hacking. They restricted your access, Vivian said, and then accused you of unauthorized access. The contradiction is the case. Meanwhile, Derek Salton was making calculations of his own. His lawyer had reviewed the discovery materials and delivered a blunt assessment. If this goes to trial, you're a co-defendant. Whitmore told you to take credit and bury the evidence. That's conspiracy to defraud. You're looking at civil liability and potential criminal referral. Derek called Vivian Cross on a Thursday evening. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. I'll testify, he said. Everything. The emails, the cover-up, the transfer denials, all of it. In exchange for what? Immunity from prosecution. And I want it in writing from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Vivian made the call. The U.S. Attorney's Office agreed within 48 hours. Derek Salton would testify as a cooperating witness. When Whitmore found out, he threw a crystal paperweight through his office window. The glass held, it was tempered, but the crack spread from corner to corner like a spider web. His assistant heard it from the hallway. She didn't go in. That night, Whitmore called an emergency board meeting. He wanted to settle, quietly, before the hearing. His lawyers proposed $200,000 and a mutual NDA. Vivian called Camille. They're offering $200,000 to make this disappear. No, it's a lot of money for someone with $2,000 in savings. It's not about money. He called me a diversity hire. He accused me of a crime I didn't commit. He let another man take credit for my work, and he did it all because I'm black and I push a coffee cart. Camille's voice didn't waver. I want the hearing. I want it public. I want him to say it to my face in a courtroom with cameras rolling. Vivian smiled for the first time since they'd met. I was hoping you'd say that. The night before the hearing, Camille sat in the library after closing. Edna had left the back door open, as always. Computer 3 glowed in the dark. The chatbot was open. Camille typed, I'm scared. The bot replied, I'm here, and I'm glad you are too. She touched the USB drive at her neck. Tomorrow the whole world would be watching. Tomorrow she would walk into a federal courtroom as the woman they called the coffee girl, the diversity hire, the criminal suspect, and she would walk out as something else entirely. But first, Grant Whitmore was going to learn exactly what it costs to underestimate the wrong person. The federal courthouse on Center Street filled before dawn. Reporters stacked 3 deep outside the entrance. Camera crews from 6 networks jockeyed for position on the marble steps. Inside, every seat in courtroom 4B was taken. Journalists, cybersecurity professionals, civil rights advocates, and 200 people who'd driven from as far as 3 states away wearing T-shirts that read #Justice for Camille. Camille arrived in a navy blazer she'd bought at a thrift store for $12. Vivian walked beside her. Edna sat in the 3rd row, hands folded in her lap, wearing the same cardigan she wore every day at the library. Grant Whitmore entered from the opposite door. Gray suit, 4 lawyers. A face like concrete. Judge Annette Faulkner called the proceeding to order at 9 a.m. sharp. She was 62, wire-rimmed glasses, known for 2 things: absolute silence in her courtroom and 0 tolerance for corporate theatrics. Vivian Cross stood first. Your Honor, this case is simple. My client, Camille Archer, saved Dominion Shield from a catastrophic ransomware attack. In return, she was humiliated, fired, accused of a federal crime she did not commit, and subjected to a racially motivated campaign to destroy her reputation. The evidence is not ambiguous. It is not circumstantial. It is written in Dominion Shield's own emails, in their own words, by their own CEO. She placed 3 exhibits on the overhead projector: the delete this thread email, the diversity hire email, the badge access restriction log. The courtroom murmured. Judge Faulkner's gavel silenced it. Derek Salton took the witness stand next. He wore no tie. His Stanford ring was absent for the first time anyone could remember. His lawyer had coached him for 12 hours, but the truth didn't need coaching. Mr. Salton, Vivian began, on the morning of the system recovery, did you tell Mr. Whitmore that the decryption key came from an external source? Yes. What was his response? Derek's jaw tightened. He told me to delete the email thread and take credit for the recovery. Did you comply? Yes, I did. Why? Because he's the CEO, because I'd been there 11 years, because I was afraid of losing everything I'd built. Derek paused. His voice dropped. And because it was easier to take credit from a black woman pushing a coffee cart than to admit she was smarter than all of us. The courtroom went silent. Not the polite silence of attention, the heavy silence of something breaking open. Vivian let it sit for 5 full seconds before continuing. Mr. Salton, in the 5 months prior to the ransomware attack, did Dominion Shield receive anonymous vulnerability reports? 11 of them, all legitimate, all patched by my team. Were those reports sent by Miss Archer? The IP logs from the library match. The technical detail matches her skill level. Yes, I believe they were all from her. And your team took credit for those as well? Yes. Vivian turned to the judge. No further questions. Whitmore's lead attorney, a silver-haired partner from a firm that charged $1,400 an hour, tried to reframe the narrative. He argued that the verbal bounty was a joke, not a contract, that Camille's anonymous reports proved she was comfortable operating in secrecy, that her decryption method raised legitimate security concerns. Judge Faulkner listened without expression. Then she asked one question. Counselor, does your client dispute that Miss Archer decrypted the ransomware? A pause. No, Your Honor. But the method, does your client dispute that the decryption key was sent from Miss Archer's personal email at 12:21 a.m., 9 hours before Mr. Salton's team claimed credit? The timeline is not in dispute, but does your client dispute the contents of the emails entered into evidence? Specifically, the instruction to delete the communication thread and the characterization of Miss Archer as a diversity hire? Silence. Those are the facts of this case, Counselor. I don't need theories about method. Vivian called Camille to the stand. Camille walked to the witness box the way she'd walked through the Dominion lobby on the day they fired her. Back straight, chin level, eyes forward. She sat down. Vivian asked her to describe what happened in the war room. Camille told it plainly. The red alerts, the coffee cart, her offer to help, Whitmore's laughter, the words he used. She didn't dramatize. She didn't cry. She spoke the way she wrote code, precise, logical, without a single wasted syllable. Then Vivian asked, Miss Archer, would you be willing to demonstrate your decryption method for the court? Yes. A laptop was provided, a standard issue Dell similar to the library machine. The court's IT specialist loaded a sandboxed simulation of the ransomware environment. Camille sat down, opened the terminal, and began typing. The courtroom watched on the overhead display, every keystroke projected on a 10-foot screen. Vivian narrated for the non-technical observers, but she didn't need to. The speed was the testimony. Camille's fingers moved with the fluid certainty of someone who had been speaking this language since childhood. 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The simulation cracked. Green text cascaded down the screen. No one in the courtroom moved. Camille looked up from the laptop and spoke directly to Whitmore for the first time since the war room. I didn't need your servers. I didn't need your title. I didn't need your permission. I just needed a library card in 3 minutes. Her voice was steady, unhurried. The system you spent $200 million building? I broke it on a computer that can barely run a spreadsheet. Not because I'm a criminal, because I'm better than every engineer in that room, and you knew it. That's why you were afraid. Whitmore's face went white. His lead attorney put a hand on his arm. Whitmore shook it off. Judge Faulkner removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, and put them back on. I've heard enough. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. Dominion Shield is ordered to pay $1 million pursuant to the verbal contract made on company livestream, plus $4 million in compensatory damages for wrongful termination, defamation, and racial discrimination. Mr. Whitmore, I am also referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for investigation into evidence tampering and obstruction. She looked directly at Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, you had a genius working for you. You paid her $31,000 a year to make your coffee, and when she saved your company, you tried to put her in prison. The only system that got hacked here was your sense of decency. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted. Applause, tears, camera flashes. Vivian put her arm around Camille's shoulders. Nina Graves was sobbing in the 4th row. Troy Beckett, the analyst who'd filmed the lobby video, stood on his chair and cheered. Edna Holloway sat quietly in the 3rd row, hands still folded, tears running down her cheeks, smiling the way only someone who had believed for 15 years could smile. Outside the courthouse, the crowd chanted Camille's name. She stood on the top step, Vivian on one side, Edna on the other. The USB drive caught the sunlight at her throat. A reporter shouted, "Camille, what's next?" She looked at Edna, then at the sky, then back at the cameras. I'm going back to the library. But she wasn't going back as a visitor. She was going back to build something that would make sure no child with a library card and a dream would ever be told they weren't enough. And Grant Whitmore's empire was about to learn that the real hack was never about code. 6 months after the verdict, Grant Whitmore resigned. The board didn't give him a choice. Dominion Shield stock had lost 41% of its value since the ransomware incident. 3 major clients, a hospital network, a federal contractor, and a Fortune 100 bank, had terminated their contracts within weeks of the hearing. The SEC opened a preliminary inquiry into whether Whitmore had misled shareholders about the breach response. His corporate credit card was deactivated on a Tuesday. His parking spot was reassigned on a Wednesday. By Thursday, his name had been removed from the lobby wall. He left the building carrying a single box. No press conference, no farewell email, no golden parachute. The board had invoked the morality clause in his contract, citing the judge's referral to the U.S. attorney. His $1,400 an hour lawyers were now billing him personally, and the invoices were growing faster than his savings could cover. Derek Salton fared differently. His cooperation had earned him immunity from criminal prosecution, but Dominion's new interim CEO terminated him quietly. No public statement, no severance dispute. Derek sold his house in Greenwich, moved to a smaller town in Vermont, and took a mid-level security consulting job that paid 1/3 of his former salary. He never wore the Stanford ring again. Dominion Shield's new board sent Camille a formal offer 3 weeks after Whitmore's departure. Chief Security Officer, corner office on the 43rd floor. Salary, $420,000 a year, full equity package. The letter was hand-delivered to her studio apartment by a courier in a black town car. Camille read it at her kitchen table. She read it again. Then she folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and wrote one word on the outside. No. She had a different plan. The $5 million, $1 million from the verbal contract, $4 million in damages, sat in an account she'd opened at a community credit union in Westbrook. She hadn't spent $1 of it on herself. Same apartment, same prepaid phone, same thrift store wardrobe. Nina Graves had taken her to dinner to celebrate the verdict, and Camille had ordered water and a side salad, and Nina had nearly cried. You have $5 million and you're still ordering the cheapest thing on the menu. Old habits. Camille, what are you going to do with the money? Camille had smiled, the kind of smile that comes from a decision already made. I'm going to give it back, just not to them. She called it the Archer Foundation. The paperwork took 2 months. The mission statement took her 15 minutes because she'd been writing it in her head since she was 11 years old. To provide technology education, equipment, and mentorship to children in foster care and underserved communities, because every child deserves a library card and a chance to say hello to the world. The headquarters was the Westbrook Public Library. Not a rented floor in a glass tower, not a co-working space with exposed brick and cold brew on tap. The library. The same building with peeling paint and burned-out fluorescent lights where a frightened 8-year-old had once asked a librarian what the internet was made of. Edna Holloway became the foundation's community director. She protested for exactly 4 seconds before accepting. I'm 68 years old, Camille. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know how to make a child feel safe in front of a computer. That's the only qualification that matters. The foundation's first class had 20 children, ages 8 to 15, all from foster care. Each one received a brand new laptop, not a refurbished hand-me-down, not a Chromebook with half the keys missing, a real machine, loaded with development tools, with a sticker on the lid that read, "You belong here." Camille taught the first session herself. She stood at the front of the library's community room, the same room where she used to sit in the corner and code while other kids played outside. The USB drive hung at her neck. She held it up so they could see it. This holds the first program I ever wrote. I was 11. I was in my 4th foster home. I didn't have a computer or a teacher or anyone who thought I was going to be anything. I had a library card and a woman who left chocolate bars on keyboards. She glanced at Edna, who was already crying. The program was a chatbot. It said one thing: I'm here, and I'm glad you are too. That's what I want you to know today. I'm here, and I'm glad you are too. A boy in the front row, 9 years old, oversized hoodie, sneakers with the soles peeling, raised his hand. Are you really the lady who hacked the big company? I didn't hack it. I fixed it. There's a difference. Can you teach us to do that? Camille knelt down to his eye level. I can teach you to do things I haven't even thought of yet. That's the whole point. 2 weeks after the first class, Ghostline revealed their identity, not in a press release, not in a blog post, in person, at the library on a Saturday morning. Her name was Tessa Winters, 26 years old, senior security engineer at Google. She walked into the community room during a coding session carrying a box of donuts and wearing a hoodie that said 404, sleep not found. Camille recognized the writing style before she recognized the face. Ghostline? In the flesh. Tessa set the donuts on the desk. You helped me once, on a forum. I was 14 in foster care in Ohio, and I couldn't figure out a recursive function. You spent 3 hours walking me through it. You signed off with, "Don't give up. The code doesn't care who you are. It only cares if you're right." Camille's hand went to the USB drive. I remember. You changed my life. I figured it was time I showed up in person. Tessa looked around the room at the 20 kids hunched over their laptops, fingers flying. I'd like to volunteer, if you'll have me. Every Saturday? Every Saturday. That evening, after the children had gone home and Edna had locked up, Camille sat alone at computer 3. The old Dell hummed its dying wasp hum. The dead pixel cluster still blinked in the upper left corner. She plugged in the USB drive and opened the chatbot one last time. She typed, "How are you today?" The bot replied, "I'm here, and I'm glad you are too." Camille smiled. She closed the program, unplugged the USB, and hung it back around her neck. Then she turned off the monitor and sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the building settle around her. The creak of old shelves, the tick of the radiator, the faint hum of the Wi-Fi router that hadn't been updated in 4 years. Somewhere in this building, 15 years ago, a lonely girl had typed her first line of code. Tonight, 20 children had typed theirs. And tomorrow, there would be more. She stood, pushed in the chair, and walked toward the back door. The light from the street lamp caught the USB drive one last time as she stepped outside. A girl, small, quiet, maybe 10, was sitting on the library steps, laptop open on her knees. She looked up at Camille with wide eyes. The door was locked. I wanted to practice. Camille sat down beside her. The night air was cool. The screen glowed between them. Show me what you've got. The girl turned the laptop toward her. On the screen, in green text on a black background, 2 words blinked. Hello, world. If you believe every child deserves a chance to say those 2 words, share this story. Drop a comment. Who believed in you when no one else did? And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might be yours. The girl didn't look up. I don't have a computer at home. My foster mom says I can't use hers. Edna looked at the clock, looked at the girl, looked at the door. Then she took off her coat and sat down. What are you trying to do? I want to make something, like a game, or a friend. Edna didn't know the first thing about computers, but she knew how to stay. She called the after-hours number and told them she'd lock up late. She made hot cocoa in the staff kitchen. She put a chocolate bar on the keyboard. That girl was Camille Archer. That night, she wrote her first line of code. That chocolate bar was the first gift anyone had given her in 2 years. 20 years later, Camille would build a foundation in that library and name Edna its heart. Because sometimes the most powerful code in the world isn't written on a screen. It's written in the quiet act of staying when everyone else has gone home.
The story's over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We usually think the people who change our life are the big ones, the mentor who opens the door, the boss who gives you the break. Somebody powerful notices somebody small, and everything changes. But the story taught me something different. The person who changed everything wasn't powerful. She was a librarian. She didn't teach a girl to code. She didn't understand the code. She just stayed, left the back door unlocked, put chocolate on the keyboard, made cocoa at midnight, and didn't ask questions. That's it. We underestimate that. We think changing somebody's life requires something big. Money, connections, a grand gesture, but most of the time, the thing that saves a person isn't a gesture, it's presence. Somebody who shows up when nobody else does, who sits next to you without needing a reason, who doesn't try to fix your life, just quietly make it possible for you to fix it yourself. That's the hardest kind of love to give, because it's invisible. Nobody claps for it. Nobody writes article about the person who just stayed. But ask anybody who made it out of something hard, and they will tell you it was always somebody who stayed. So this week, stayed for somebody, even when it's thankless, even when nobody notices. If you had a person like that, tell me about them. I read every comment, hit like, subscribe. See you next time.